Hey, what's up? And welcome to the Secrets of Scale podcast. I'm the host, Troy Erickson, and today I'm with probably the most decorated guest I've had so far in terms of just overall general accomplishments. Not only has he generated roughly $500 million, maybe more, through several businesses, many of whom you've probably bought from before if you're an internet marketer, but he's also a world record power lifter, and his name is right up there with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Lee in the Fitness Hall of Fame. So I'd like to welcome AJ Roberts to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Troy. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So AJ, you and I think we met about a year ago, maybe a little bit more. And you offered me just like a ton of insight. I didn't know who you were, and you were just like very, very giving in all the information you gave me to a complete stranger. So first of all, I appreciate that. And second of all, I always like to ask the very first question, how the heck did you get into this industry and like get all this knowledge that you shared with me and that you're going to share today?
Yeah, I mean, it all happened when I was in college. So I was studying to be a physical ed teacher. And then I decided I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach. And so I was at a D1 school, volunteered in the strength and conditioning room. And as I got to know the other strength coaches, here I am, top level coaches in the country, and come to find out, like the highest that a strength coach was making at the time, and I don't know what it is now, I'm sure it's more, but at the collegiate level was like $250,000. And that was like if you're a head coach at like one of the, top football schools. And just listening to the other coaches, like they were all broke, they were in debt. And I actually got an offer to be the head strength and conditioning coach for track and field at the University of Idaho, and they were willing to pay me a grand total of $12,000 for the year. So I was like very confused by this. And so I was like, okay, like who in the marketplace is kind of a strength and conditioning coach who's like, selling products or like, doing this craft, but making money other ways, and stumbled on a fella called Eric Cressy. He had a product called Magnificent Mobility. It was a physical DVD, but they were selling it via, sales letter, that kind of thing. And so I reached out to him. He was actually powerlifting at the time. And so I reached out to him, leveraging kind of my name in that field, and was like, hey man, like I see you making products and stuff. I'm curious how to do it. He was like, hey, you need to come to this thing called the Ryan Lee Boot Camp. So I flew out to actually to his place in Boston. I slept on his couch that night. We drove over to Stamford, Connecticut for this Ryan Lee boot camp thing. And while I was there, all these people were up on stage sharing their story and then pitching their products. And I just was like, man, like these guys don't know that much more than me, right? And I didn't feel like I belonged in the audience. I felt like I belonged on that stage. And so one of the things that was shared there was the easiest way to launch an info product was to get a series of experts, do interviews, and then have them promote it for you. And this was back when, everyone was a little bit more liberal with sharing their list, and it was the heyday of the big launches and all of that stuff. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to get the top strength and conditioning coach in the country and, get 12, 15 guys, interview them. So I strategically, who's got an audience, who's got a list, interviewed these guys, and then was like, well, wait a minute, like, how do I sell this thing? So at the event, they were talking about copywriting and sales letters and things like that. And so there was a guy named Kyle Bettis, and he actually ended up working for Telman Knudsen, who's like a big internet marketer guy back in the day. He's still big, but he's kind of behind the scenes. Like he's not on the radar of too many people. But I hired him to write my sales page, and it was like 25K for like the copy. And at the time, like I didn't know if that was expensive or not. All I knew was like my buddy who coded web pages for banks was making like 20 grand a web page, like, but it was like super secure. And so I was like, oh, okay. So put it all on the credit cards. I didn't have this money, leap of faith, launched the product, had no list. So basically all of the people I interviewed, I relied on them. They promoted it. And when the dust settled, like I lost money because obviously paying the affiliates and paying Carl and all of this, but I was like, I'm onto something here, right? I'm onto something. And so with the list I generated, I was sending a weekly newsletter and doing those and basically like as an affiliate marketer promoting other people's products. And then I decided, well, I need, run my own, I want to open a gym. And so I opened a gym, and basically, the goal was to use the gym as kind of like a video studio to shoot products, do that thing, and then train clients. And I opened the gym, and I didn't, nobody came. And so I was like, oh, man, how do I build a business? And I went to hire these guys. They ran this company called the Fitness Consulting Group. And I got on the phone with them to hire them. And we're talking and talking. And I was just right out of college, totally green. And they could hear the enthusiasm and the passion I had. And they said, we have an opening at one of our health clubs in the personal training department. We would love for you to come and run that department. And me being kind of like, barely scraping by, I was like, wait, you're going to pay me to learn from you? So like in my head, I'm like, okay, fly out to Kentucky. If I don't like it, I can say no. So they flew me from Spokane, Washington to Kentucky. I was there with them. I didn't really have a reason to say no. And in the back of my head, I was like, I can just learn everything that I possibly can learn about sales and marketing. And they were teaching online stuff as well. So I was like, man, like it's basically a paid internship. So I went there to the health club, and like I said, they had their fitness consulting thing, and they were talking one day about their web tech guy didn't know how to upload these audio files to the internet. Like this is back when YouTube didn't exist, and so to upload audio, you had to use Audio Acrobat, and you had to load it to Amazon, and then you had to use this player to be able to post. And I was like, I took one web class in college, and we learned how to do this. So I was like, I could do it. How much does it pay? So now I'm getting to listen to all their mastermind coaching calls, all that stuff, while I'm learning from them as well in the sales and marketing front. And they kept mentioning this guy, Dan Kennedy, and they just got back from one of his events, and they did this highlights from the event. And I was like, well, I got to learn from this Dan Kennedy guy if this is what they're doing. So everything I was making, I was reinvesting in products to learn in that. And so that's when I dove into the world of Dan Kennedy and direct response marketing, and quickly realized that it wasn't the doing of the thing that truly made the money. It was the ability to market and sell it. And that, if you're amazing at what you do, you add marketing and sales, and it's rocket fuel, right? If you shit at what you do and you're not very good, there's only so much you can do to polish a turd. But it's like, if you have that combination, and being that I was a successful powerlifter, I knew how to get strong, I knew how to get results. So I was like, man, I just got to get in front of people. And so I started consuming as much information as I could about marketing. Led me to Frank Kern's stuff with the internet, Mass Control, and Jeff Walker with Product Launch Formula. And because we were doing a bunch of stuff online, it was two gym owners, but I started saying, well, what if we did this? And what if we did that? And we would try these things that I suggested, and it would work. And sooner or later, they were like, hey, do you want to just run the marketing for us? And I was like, yes. So I ended up transitioning out of the gym, going full-time online to run the marketing for them. And over the course of the next few years, we built up a dozen or so businesses, from consulting business to physical products to online products, digital products. We had a certification company. We launched two franchises. And then, I was at a kind of youth crisis in my life, and went through a divorce, and was like, you know what, like, I'm going to go do my own thing. Like, we've built this thing, and I got this tiny piece of this pie, but I'm going to go do my own thing. And, went off and started launching other people in the fitness space, was in some masterminds, and it was actually a really unique concept for a mastermind. Nobody in the mastermind led the mastermind. What we did was 4 times a year, we paid for an expert to come in and teach us. And so we were all equals in the mastermind. And the very first one we did was with Yannick Silver. And I asked him a very simple question. I said, how come you still sell physical products? Does it decrease refund rates? Like, I was looking for some tactical answer. He just looked at me and was like, bro, I don't have time to take everything I've done and make it digital. And so after the event, I reached out to him. I was like, hey, like, I will take your products. And my goal was just to get all his products for free. Send me all your shit, and I'll convert it to MP4 files and put it online for you. And he's like, done. So he sends it all to me. He then uses that, those digital, his physical products that are now digital, as a bonus for a launch. Does really, really well. And so we start exploring how we can work together. and he had the underground online seminar, and he said, hey, look, I'm going away for like 3 weeks with Richard Branson. We're going to the safari in Africa, and this sales page was supposed to be up, and we're supposed to already be selling tickets. I'm so far behind. Like, would you just take this project on? I said, sure. And when he came back, I built a whole marketing plan for it. And this was Underground 8. And, it was the largest underground they had ran. We put more butts in seats than ever before. And that was kind of my segue into internet marketing, online marketing, which then led me to meeting all of the people that are, so I guess gurus in that space. And so it's a crazy journey. But really it all came from the position of serving first, right? And it wasn't in the, what can I do for you? It was in getting to know somebody and then seeing the opportunity and saying like, I would love to do this for you. And because they could see what that was, they were willing to move forward with it, and a lot of times people will say, what can I do for you? It's like, I don't know. But if I was able to see like, here's a gap and I can fill that gap for them. And it was kind of that whole go-giver mentality, knowing that I wanted to end up in that space. And it was kind of like, you can do a launch in fitness and make $1 million, or you can do a launch in internet marketing and make 10. And it was like the same amount of work. So it was like, okay, that's the direction I'm heading. And that's really, is a long introduction, but a short story there in terms of how it all came to be.
Yeah, I think it's really amazing too, because like the story itself and like how everything lines up and you were talking to the right people at the right time and putting yourself out there, in a way, it really shows like how possible it is to like get where you are. Because for example, looking at myself, like my passion before internet marketing and like doing what I do now was baseball. And like I trained at Eric Kresge's facility literally for an entire summer. And and him and his business partner, Pete, they run a great operation there. So it's like, I saw that. And I kind of like started in my free time in school to just like look into like online businesses and trying to like figure out my way. And then I was pretty much on just like freelance sites, like picking up jobs, found a guy to work under, learned a lot, and just like kept going, connected with people. So I think that's a theme for any freelancers listening or people that really want to like be a very serious entrepreneur one day. Is like, you just have to like reach out to people and like see what happens, and start doing something you enjoy and keep going. And I think one of the most important points you said too was that your payday came not when you knew how to do something, but how to market something, how to sell something.
Yeah.
So on that note, how did you get into building 3 of the biggest like online like softwares and platforms that I've seen? So you've got Kartra, EverWebinar, WebinarJam. Tell us a little bit more about those, how you got into them and how you scaled them.
Yeah. So back in, I was a huge customer to pretty much every launch, I was buying the product. And I think that, and I mean, it would be interesting to hear from you too. Like, I think that what you find, most of the greatest teachers or leaders are also the biggest consumers, right? And so, I was consuming a lot of information, and because of that, I had a lot of knowledge. And then because I had different businesses, we had a dozen businesses at the time that I was able to test and implement stuff. I then got the real world practical experience, right? And so people would reach out to me all the time asking like to consult with me or to get my opinion or for help with something. And I made some friends in the fitness space, and Sarah who Jenkins was dating Andy Jenkins at the time. They weren't married, but he was, for those that don't know, Andy was one of the early internet marketers, and he also is a part of Hacks and Films. They made the Blair Witch Project, and so they had this new project called Exists, which was a Bigfoot movie. They were going to be in Austin shooting it for like a whole year, and Andy was like, I guess, sharing with Sarah that he didn't know what he was going to do with the internet marketing, because he didn't want to just not do anything for a year, but he wasn't going to have time. Like he's executive producer of this movie. So long story short, I was in La Jolla for a mastermind meeting, and she set up a meeting between the two of us, and we just hit it off right away. And we would, and because I was an avid student of his material, I knew like how he thought, I knew what he taught. It was like, I was really knew, his entire operation and what he was doing. And so after a meeting, he's like, hey, like, let me move you out to La Jolla and you can run my company while I'm gone. And so I basically, wrote his emails, did all the copy because he was still doing all that stuff at the time. I just became him for I think it was like 10 months. And I can't say I really grew the company over that time because we were very limited. We didn't have Andy to get in front of the camera and do those things, but we were able to not go backwards, right? Which was this big thing. And so at the end of that, he came back and it was kind of like awkward because now it's like I went, like I was doing everything to now Andy's back. Like, what do I do? And so, I'm always one of these people that like, I don't think relationships have to last forever. So like when it starts to get to that point where it seems like a natural end, I like to eject before things get messy. And so, I sat down with him, we had a conversation and he agreed. And so I went off and started doing my own thing. And then I was at Kevin Nation's mastermind meeting and Ryan Stewman was there. And, I didn't know this, but Ryan spent his last dollar to get there. And he, the first day, and Kevin does things differently, and that's what makes him such a great mentor. But the first day, he's like, all right, so we're just going to get to work. What do you need to do? Like, what's the big sticking point? And Ryan said, like, I don't know how to get customers. Like, I'm not getting, like, if I can get them on the phone, I can close them, but I'm not getting any traffic. I'm not able to get in front of the right people. And I go, bro, you just run Facebook ads. Like, it's not that hard. He's like, huh? And I was like, yeah, you just do a video ad, put a link to the application and you're good to go. And so he's like, let's go set it up. So we went to the corner of the room. We set up an ad. I told him, like, I think it was $100 or $500, but like Facebook didn't bill you until you spent that much money. He didn't even have the money to spend on ads, but because Facebook billed in arrears, he's like, sure. Anyway, he got like 20, 30 apps before lunch. And by the end of the day, it closed like $20,000 in sales. And he was like blown away. So he's like, bro, will you run my ads for me? And I was like, how much is like an ad person making in the industry? And so I asked Frank Kern, and he was paying some girl like $3,500 a month to run his ads. So I was like, that sounds like a good number. So I was like, yeah, $3,500 a month, I'll run your ads for you. And that led to like a bunch of high ticket people being like, hey, can you run my ads? So kind of created an accidental agency. What was really cool is they were all selling $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 front end products, events, those kind of things. So I just had to get them strategy sessions and, they closed 1 or 2 a month and they were in profit. So I built that up. And then Andy had partnered with Mike Fosame and he reached out to me and they were growing. And he was like, hey, like I have to be more of like a CEO. I need someone to step in and kind of run the marketing. Like, would you be interested? He was like, you don't have to stop doing anything you're doing, but like, would that interest you? And because, these guys are kind of like heroes to me, it was like, absolutely. And again, it was like that whole mentality of like, I get to learn for free, get paid, and come back. And so I came back in to run the marketing and they had already begun work on WebinarJam. We launched that. I think we did like a $4.6 million launch, which was like the biggest launch they'd done in a long time. And I was like, man, this software thing seems to be like a really good, we should focus on this. And for whatever reason at the time, they felt that it was better to do info products and that the software was a tool and that we had to teach and that people would buy the tool, but it was never going to be the main thing. And so I didn't agree with that decision. I really thought software was the future based on the way things went and just like how much easier it was to promote. And this is when, big launches have really come to an end. The list share and all of that really wasn't happening anymore. So again, I felt like a mismatch with like their vision and it got frustrating to me. And I'm trying to convince them, with a tiny percentage of ownership, and I'm trying to convince them to change the course. And I just realized, I was like, wait a minute, like, this is really their company, not my company. Like, yeah, they brought me in, but it's really them. And I was like, you know what, I think I should just go back consulting. So I went off again, built up some coaching program, mastermind, and fast forward to 2018, my daughter was just about to be born, and I was traveling all over, building up the coaching program. I was doing events in England and Australia and all these different places. And I was kind of like, man, when my daughter comes, I really don't want to have to travel and do all this stuff. And Andy reached out to me. He's like, hey, we just launched Kartra and Frank Kern's on board. And, like, I would love for you to come in and like figure out if like what you can do for us. Same kind of thing. He needed to focus on CEO stuff. And this time, I was like, hey, I really don't want to just focus on marketing. I really want to focus on the entire customer journey. And so, chief revenue officer seemed like the right position. And it's funny. He's like, man, every time you come back, it costs me more and more money. But it was that experience that I bought and the new angles and the new things. And so they had a big launch for Kartra, but it was trending down. And, I came in and just started looking at like optimization and just small things we could do to turn things around. And that was really the turning point. And so we just began chipping away. And over, the last 3 years, we've gone from just over 10 to over, I think we're 33, 35 million. We'll end the year around 35 million this year for this year's revenue. We've, over 100 million total in revenue since then. And I think that, there's still all these little things that I keep seeing that we need to do. And there's just still so many holes. So, really the way I look at it, and I look at any business and really when it comes down to scale is you just find the holes and then you plug them. And sometimes it's a people problem. Sometimes it's a process problem. Sometimes it's a promotional problem. And you just constantly are finding these gaps. And it can be frustrating because you feel like you're never doing enough. You can never move fast enough. But at the same time, if you're an optimistic person like me, you get excited because you're like, oh, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do this. And then the question is like, how do we do it, or who can we get to do it for us? And so, it's a wild ride. And, I see other software companies, exiting or raising funds and doing all this stuff. So far, we haven't had to take any money. We're, our profits are up even more this year. We're super profitable. And it's just a fun, exciting ride. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And it's really cool too. It's like, sure, you're building all these like really big companies that helping so many people, but at the same time, it just still revolves around like the skill and the knowledge that you built by being in so many businesses. And I can tell you too, I definitely have a lot of FOMO with things. There's always things that I could be doing. There's like 10 things on whiteboards like this one behind me that I want to like do right now, but I can only do one. So obviously you've had a great team in Genesis Digital and with Kartra. So how did you manage to build EverWebinar and WebinarJam? Did you get Kartra to a point where it was kind of like, okay, we're confident that we can kind of let this rock. Let's go like double down with another software, or how did that come to be?
So it was the other way around. And really, I have to give credit to the Genesis Digital team, especially Sarah. When Andy passed, she's continued to run the company and take on most of the stuff that like I would never want to like think about. And so, she's really, a huge part, of the success, and she's been there since the beginning with Andy. And so, but WebinarJam EverWebinar was before Kartra. So that launched, and of course that's a very singular use product, right? And so, WebinarJam for live webinars, EverWebinar for automated webinars. And originally, and this is kind of like how any great product comes to be. Originally, we were running back when we were just doing info products, we were running a lot of webinars, right? And the problem was GoToMeeting just kept crashing. We would fill it up with too many people, so people wouldn't be able to get on the webinar. It kept crashing. To counteract their issues, they kept raising their prices. And so what was $99 a month at one point ended up being $1,000 a month, which for the company wasn't that big of a deal. But for our customers who we were trying to teach to do this stuff, it was too expensive. Then YouTube came out with YouTube Live, and we were like, well, wait a minute, what if we just build a container that sits on top of YouTube Live? And that was really the idea for WebinarJam. The power to have unlimited broadcast features, but in a controlled environment, so you could basically sell from stage, right? And that was one of the early reasons WebinarJam was so successful. And then, there was page builders, all this stuff. But anytime we try to do a product, we had so much custom coding that went into things for upsells and downsells and cross sells and like, building out the funnel and being able to pass data behind the scenes. And it was like a logistical nightmare. And we were logging into, 5 or 6 different platforms. And we always joke like, man, if we could just put this into one place, if we could just have everything in one, and not like something, but like everything. What if everything could be in one? And that idea kicked around for a minute, and other people kind of came to us with their version of it, and we would early beta test for them and promote them and that kind of stuff. But it would still fall short of this like all-in-one thing. And so when I left, that idea was an idea, but it wasn't anything they formulated. I believe Andy spent about $4 million to develop Kartra originally. And the reason it was so expensive was because what he decided to do was at the core, build everything integrated, right? And so what most all-in-one platforms, like MailChimp, for example, calls itself an all-in-one platform, but it's not. It's an email marketing platform that's added on other features to satisfy their customer base. So at the core, it's a marketing system, and it somewhat integrates well, but there's still gaps. And that's how most all-in-one platforms are built, right? They start as one thing and then they've added on other stuff. Well, Kartra was the opposite of that, and is the opposite of that. At our core, everything is integrated. So it's almost impossible for us to break away a feature because of how integrated it is to something else. For example, you want to build a page, well, you have to have the forms, because they're integrated with that. You want to sell a product, well, you have to have the pages. And so it's, and the membership site and all that stuff. And so they took that concept and really ran with it and did a phenomenal launch with it. But Kartra, because of the success of WebinarJam, and it was only a single-use product, right? It's only really for webinars. They were able to shift their focus with Kartra. And so, now our focus is back on, making WebinarJam as good as it can be. And we got some incredible new features coming out. We just did a full facelift of it. And we have all these like exciting new features that have come out. And our competitors, we've paid close attention, but really up until 6 months ago, there was nothing that was really better. It depends on what you want, that's, user experience, but, from that standpoint, from a product standpoint, like we were still very competitive with everybody and at a much lower price. And so that allowed the team development wise to focus on that other stuff. But me personally, like I just focus on making the money, and then the team manages to do all of that. So it's kind of odd in that sense that like, like I inserted myself into a company that like did everything else really, really well and has amazing people. We have amazing people who do that. And like I said, like for me, I just focus on how to make the money. I let other people worry about how to keep it and how, what to do and that kind of stuff. So, and that's really something that I know my limitations and I know what I don't want to do. And I don't want to have to, worry about the operations and all of that fun jazz.
Yeah, I used to underestimate the power of a team. I thought it was just kind of like a buzzword that a lot of high-level people were throwing around, like, oh, like teamwork, it's important. I'm like, what is this, like middle school where they put like the teamwork banner on the wall? But then as soon as I like started getting to a point where I was like working literally the entire day, I was like, okay, that team thing, maybe it's real. Maybe I should check it out. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, one final question about these 3 heavy-hitting software companies. So you've got Kartra, WebinarJam. What made you decide to want to get into another webinar company, or is it just kind of like a branch?
So no, EverWebinar is just the automated of WebinarJam. So WebinarJam's for live, and then EverWebinar is for automated. So we just took, we took the power of WebinarJam and then said, okay, how do we do that for automated webinars? And the thing is that like a lot of people will do an automated webinar where they'll just throw a video on a web page, and that's fine. But think of it like this: like if you go to a live event, you're in a setting and you pay attention to the speaker, right? Yes, you could pull out your phone. It's kind of rude, so most people don't. You could leave the room, that kind of stuff. But like you're in an environment. And that's really like the container for Ever Webinar, is that like they show up, when you watch, a TV show that's really, one of my favorite shows is Succession. Every Sunday it comes out. You're not watching it live, like, it's not live, but like there's an event, right? Like you're waiting for it to drop and then you get to watch it. So the thing with Ever Webinar is you create that webinar environment, which is the closest thing to being able to sell on stage. And so they have to show up at a certain time. They have to sit and watch the webinar. They can't fast forward. They can't skip around. It's in a room, so it's not like it can easily be distracted. Yes, they could. I mean, you can be distracted anywhere, but it's the closest thing to live, right? And we do have the features built in, so you can have chat and all of that stuff, and you can have a hybrid where you actually have the ability to respond to people. And so it's no different than if your live webinar has a recorded portion of it. But it's really, that's the difference. It's just for automated webinars. And so it allows people who, most people will do a live webinar 3, 4, 5 times, dial it in, perfect it, and then flip it into an automated webinar and be able to scale, and it allows you to ultimately, be doing a webinar is, every 15 minutes. And that's actually one of the reasons we have some of the features we do. Is Neil Patel was using Ever Webinar, and he had like 4 or 5 accounts, so he could like schedule like back to ones. And we were like, well, wait a minute, let's just have that. Then we have the just in time feature because people wanted that. And so, it's really cool being a marketer and being involved with the 3 software, because like I'm looking at it from that standpoint of like, how do we increase the customer experience? How do we increase conversions? How do we, so I'm looking at it from that standpoint. And then like, if we were going to use because we use our own products to sell our own products, right? And that's really something that like we break our own products because of the volume we can do and the stuff and the things we can test. And so we're constantly running tests, constantly doing that stuff. And it's really cool because I can take that information and go and consult with other companies bringing this experience at such a higher level, and so a lot of the times, when you're really going from 0 to 7 figures, you have one product, you're systematizing it, you dial it all in, and then when you go from 7 to 8 or 9, you're really expanding your product offerings. But now you also have to expand your team, right? And so Justin Goff, who I've been friends with forever, we used to meet in a coffee shop, just me and him. He talks a lot about this to his audience about, you have to decide what kind of entrepreneur you want to be. And, for him, he knows he wants to make, I think he said like, 1.5 million a year. And that's it. He doesn't need to make more. He doesn't necessarily want to make more because he knows the workload that comes with it. And so, you just have to see, like, the way I look at it, you come from a sports background, so you get this too. It's the playbooks are out there, right? And basically, like, you're just following the playbooks, and yes, you're tweaking them based on your strengths and your skills. And Tom Brady has a different playbook than another quarterback, but they're both quarterbacks, and they're both playing the same game, and they're both going for the same championship. And so when you look at your goals, I think what a lot of people have failed to do in the money space, and I obviously coming from powerlifting with my powerlifting background, becoming all-time best in the world, breaking world records, like there was nobody above me, right? In the money world, I mean, you're looking at trillion-dollar companies, right? So making 6 figures is nothing, right? It's like squatting 100 pounds versus squatting 1,200 pounds. And so, like, when you can shift your reality, and I think that's what's so great about masterminds and coaching programs, is you get to go around other people who are more successful than you, and you suddenly realize, like, oh, they're just like me. They have the same quirks, the same faults. Like, they're no different. Okay, like if they can do it, I can do it. But it's like when you get to surround yourself with them, and I'm lucky enough to have spent time with Richard Branson. He's a billionaire. Spend time with John Paul Gioro, the founder of Paul Mitchell. He's a billionaire. You start to realize, like, these are just fun guys. There's nothing that's like, obviously there's something special, but it's nothing that it suddenly doesn't seem so far out of reach. And so when you realize that it's just a playbook and you're just filling that in and you can get around those people, it's like when it comes to the secrets of scale, it's really like you're just okay, here's what I'm modeling, here's what I'm doing. And if you stay focused, you'll do that. And also realize there's so many different ways to that thing. And so don't jump from one path to the next path, because, then you're starting again from scratch. And it's really cool to be able to do that, in Genesis Digital with them and their products, and then to be able to go and help, friends, family, and coaching and consulting clients at their businesses, and see that it all plays out like that. And so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking back, as a world record holding powerlifter, what are some things that you learned in that area of your life that have carried over into business? Because I can relate to that too. Like, all I ever want to do as a kid was be a professional baseball player. Made it to Division II college. Obviously, that's not as far as you made it in powerlifting. But I learned and took away so many lessons, not just like the work ethic and like always like find a different route. You can always get it done. You can always get there. But also, like, when baseball kind of ended for me, I learned that it wasn't everything. And it was kind of like a philosophical lesson and also like a hardworking tactical lesson all combined into one. And I pretty much just used that for business purposes. And so far it's done well. So I'm kind of curious if you have any really big takeaways from lifting.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said there, like everything matters and then really nothing matters. Like that's important to understand too, because like really it's about being, calm amongst the chaos. The calmer you are, the more emotionally stable you are, like your decision making, your ability to handle pressure, all of that stuff. I think that's really, really key. But from the sports standpoint, like I think what's great with sports is there's levels, right? Like you understand if you want to play in the NFL, you're going to play Pee Wee football, right? And then you're going to go to middle school, and then you're going to go to high school, then you're going to go to college, and then you get drafted, and you're going to play pro. And at any point, like you could drop off, right? It's just what it is. But like you still get that opportunity. And I think that like entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs or whatever, people listen to this are, because I know there's a lot of freelancers and that kind of thing, right? Like there's levels, and you get to like move up the levels. And at some point you might decide that that's good enough. Like, this is all I want to do. Like, this is my output. Right. And that might be, travel baseball on the weekend with your buddies. Right. Or it could be professional. And the key to understand though, is that you're going to have to work your way through it. And to do that, you got to show up, you got to practice, you got to eat some shit, right? You're going to get injured, right? Like, which is setbacks, failures, setbacks. So if you look at it like that journey, and then, the real key to anything is just don't quit, right? Like, just don't quit. But also know that if you want to quit, that's totally fine, right? Like, but like, that's the thing that most entrepreneurs struggle with is they are where they are, they see where they want to be, and the frustration is then created because they're not there. And excuse me, Dan Sullivan talks a lot about this, calls it the gap, right? But in reality, it's actually what causes anxiety. And most entrepreneurs are ridden with anxiety because they're ultimately they're looking at a future version of themselves, comparing themselves to where they are now. And if you look at yourself, like take yourself, for example, and you go and look back 2 years and see how far you've come, it's for most people, it's a holy shit. Like, how did you do that? But for you, you're seeing how far you still have to go. And so what's driving you can also destroy you, because like you're driven by that future vision of yourself. You're driven of this, well, like, okay, I'm going to have this, I'm going to live here, I'm going to have, have these things, and I'm going to be able to do these things, I'm going to have this freedom. And like, but like you're comparing who you are today, and you're beating yourself up because, like we use a fitness example. If you want to lose weight, you don't have a 6-pack abs, and you have a cheat meal or whatever, you're going to beat yourself up because you're like, oh, I'm such a loser, I'm such an idiot, why did I do that? Entrepreneurs do the same thing, right? Like, oh, why didn't I work tonight? Why did I go out with my friends? Like, why did I sleep in? Why didn't I, like, and it's like you beat yourself up. And you have to learn that like you're human, that this is a journey, that like it's okay to take back, like rest, recover is just as important. And I think that came from the athlete's world for me, being the ability to rest and recover. But it's looking at it like that and saying like, okay, like, anybody listening to this, if I know we have a lot of copywriters who follow you, but like if you say, okay, I'm going to start an email agency like Troy, I want to be like Troy, and I'm going to start an email agency. Well, understand you're starting from nothing. Like you are at zero. You do not have anything because it's brand new. So your first goal is not to go from 0 to 8 figures. Your first goal is to go from 0 to 1, right? And get that one client. And then how do we go from 1 to 2, right? And that might mean that you get one client and you have to work until you get them results so that you can share those results. And having worked with a lot of fitness professionals when I was coaching, consulting in that space specifically, I can tell you now that the coaches who had no problem building a business once they learned sales and marketing were the ones that had testimonial after testimonial and case study after case study. The ones who struggled, they did not get results. And the only way to do that is and that's why I love the hero's journey. The first person on the hero's journey is you. You're the hero, right? You get the results for yourself. That's your initial marketing. I've been doing this for me. I want to do it for somebody else. Then once you get results for someone else, now you become the mentor and they're the hero and you showcase them and you're looking for more. And that's how business is built. But it's that understanding of where am I right in this moment and what's the next step? Because like when I started lifting, I never forget, I started when I went to college, I was able to go train with a world record holder. And the first day there, my best squat at the time was like 500 pounds, 520 pounds, something like that. And this guy squatted 1,141 pounds. That was his world record. His name was Brent Mikesell. And the first day in the gym with him, he asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to break your record, right? And he laughed, right? But like cockiness and confidence are a very thin line, right? But the difference, like I knew that I could, like in my head, that was reality. Like I was going to do that. It wasn't like, oh, I'd like to. It was like, I'm going to break your world record. And he just looked at me and said, okay, like, well, this is what you're going to have to do. But I was walking in with a 500-pound squat, wanting to get to, 1,200 pounds, was the goal. And that took me 10 years, but the goal never changed. So I set the goal and then that was irrelevant anymore. It wasn't like I went in the gym and just loaded up to 12 pounds. Oh, I suck today. I can't do it. No, I had to go from 5 to 550 to 600 to 650 to 700, and along the way I moved across the country. I went and trained at the best gym in the world in Columbus, Ohio. Like you make these things, the goal was always the same, so the target never moved, the wind, the arrow, the things, I went through all sorts of stuff, but the goal never changed. I think that that's the key with entrepreneurship and the key with anyone building a business when it comes to growth and scale. It's like, what is that goal? And if do you want to build to sell? Do you want to build and just be profitable, like lifestyle? Like, what is the goal? Lock it in, and then you never waver from the goal. But understand the path may shift and things may change and things like that. But the outcome that you're shooting for, you're still heading in that direction. So that's probably the biggest lessons there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for anybody listening, like, please go back and watch the replay of this and like take notes on that, because a lot of these things are not like tactical things that you're going to see on a stat sheet, but they make all the difference. The part I love the most is like balancing the cockiness and confidence on one side, like knowing like, hey, I don't care how long it takes, I'm going to get to this goal, but at the same time being patient. And I can think of a couple of examples with that. So the first one, back in the sports realm, is when Tom Brady was drafted, Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, came up to him and he was like, hey, you're Kyle Brady, right? And that was a different guy they drafted. And he was like, no, my name is Tom Brady and I'm the best decision this organization has ever made. And he just looked him dead in the eye and said that. And it's crazy how that happens. But at the same time, it's like, I know for me personally, like guilt has been a very like driving factor, and I'm very hard on myself, which has worked well for me. But at the same time, I've kind of realized like, hey, sometimes it's okay. Like if you're not going to like hit, $5 million a year, like tomorrow, it's all right. Just try to get to like 2, 3, 4, 5. And even the increments are smaller when you start out. So balancing those two things is super important. Like knowing the end goal and being like, I'm going to get there and do whatever it takes. But at the same time, like sometimes if you go slow, that's best. So thank you for sharing all that. And you hit on a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask, but I'm going to say that was probably like your biggest like secret to scale right there. That's probably your best advice for people. So a couple more fun questions for you. What is the best and worst business ideas you've ever had?
So I think the worst business idea, and for some people this wouldn't be the worst, but for me personally, it was the worst. Um, was I back in the day figured out, when SEO first became a thing, I was super into the black hat stuff. So I was like, okay, sweet. So the way we siphoned traffic at the time was essentially find a product that's selling, buy a domain that was a .org, .co versus .com, and then outrank the website. So that when someone searched by a brand name, they would click our blog and we would get there. And so we built link wheels, we did all this stuff. And so I was making like a couple of sales a day off the sites that I had. And I was just like, what if I could just scrape every site that was on ClickBank and do this for every site? I'd have thousands of these, like, digital oil wells that are just like pumping me money, and I don't have to do much. And the ranking back then was Squidoo and YouTube. Like, we literally were able to rank something in 10 minutes at #1 spot. So I went and spent all this money to get a software built that would scrape ClickBank for all the domain names that were selling, right? So it had a way of using their gravity score and everything. Then it would go to GoDaddy and purchase the .org or .co, and it had it in order. If .org wasn't available, buy the .co, because org ranked better. And then it would set up the hosting in HostMonster and then deploy the WordPress blog. So all that had to be done then was to spin the articles, and which I had a software to do that already, and then post them, which I could have an assistant do. So I launched this, spent a fortune on the software, then spent a fortune on domain names, did all of this, and about 3 weeks later was the first Google slap. And literally every single site I had was wiped off the face of Google. And I mean, I had, like, even now I still have that hosting account. And even now I have no longer, I don't own the domains, but they're like, the hosting, for some reason, the database is still there, and I'll go through and delete them. But it's like, the craziest things, erectile dysfunction formula. And I'm like, I didn't even know I had this. That was the worst idea, because I didn't think, I didn't have any backup plan. I didn't think it was going to end. And so, like, in my mind, this is the way that I was going to make millions of dollars at a push of a button. And I think that the danger with that is that mentality that there was an easy way to make a lot of money, like that I could game the system, that they won't know. And what I've learned is that you can, but it usually backfires, and it usually doesn't last. And so then you're scrambling for that next thing and that next thing and the next thing. So that was definitely the worst idea. And I mean, I think it's hard to say what the best business idea is, because to me, like, success is not one thing. I think the best thing I've ever done in business is figure out my own strengths. My friend Roger Hamilton has this thing called the wealth dynamics. And then if you have teams, he has talent dynamics too. But if you can understand who you are, right, your strengths and weaknesses, and realize that the ability to change that is pretty slim, right, without a lot of like hypnotherapy and like deep work and all of this stuff, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do, but a part of this journey is just like learning to love who you are exactly, right? Knowing that you're, a creative quick start and you don't have follow through, you realize, like, okay, I'm going to come up with a lot of ideas, but I'm probably not going to finish them. Oh, I just need an integrator who's someone who will take my idea, because they don't have ideas. So they'll take my idea and they'll actually finish it, right? Once you start to know that, like, that was the best thing I ever did in business, because now whenever I'm frustrated, annoyed, I can look back and say, wait a minute, am I supposed to be doing this? Right? Is it my personality? Is it my past patterns? Is it all of those things? no, okay, I got to let this go. I got to let this go. I got to let this go. And it allows you to control your ego, because originally you want to fight it. You see this and you're like, whoa, no, I mean, I can learn to be a better project manager. I can learn to be a better people person. I can learn. And then you just realize, like, wait a minute. No, I'm an introvert. I'm a quick start. This is who I am. And this is all I'm going to bring me fully every single time. And I'm going to build things around me to make sure that's successful. For any entrepreneur, that's key, because every single entrepreneur is different. And you might be someone who's amazing with data and terrible with people. Well, guess what you need? You need someone that's good with people, because otherwise you're never going to get anything done. And I think that's kind of, for me, like, I would say the best thing in business I ever learned was just to love who I truly am, and allow that person to shine through, and then make up for those. In powerlifting, when I found weaknesses, I had to get stronger in those areas. I had to find exercises and movements. In business, when you find weaknesses, you just put a person in that place. And it's like, or you outsource it. Like, that's the beauty with business now, is there's just so many ways to fill your gaps, fill your weaknesses. It doesn't always have to come back to you. And if you can learn to let go, which is the other piece of that formula, I mean, that's big, but that would be the worst and I guess the best.
Nice. Yeah. And I can relate to that too, in the sense of like going from baseball to business. It was like, if I'm pitching and so I throw the ball, something happens and I have to like look around, figure out where the base runners are, what happened, what's the situation, what pitch should I throw, how did he react to the last one? All these thoughts going through my head so quickly. And you have like maybe 20 seconds till you have to throw the next pitch. But in business, a lot of times you have a problem and you have like literally like hours or days or sometimes weeks to make a decision. It just seems like everything just like slowed down for me. And I was able to kind of view it that way. So AJ, thank you for coming on here. Do you have any last pieces of advice or secrets of scale today?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the thing that I want a lot of younger entrepreneurs to understand is that, like, they don't have to try to do everything themselves. And early on, it's sometimes best to insert yourself and what you do, you know, with this whole entrepreneur thing, right? And it's strange because, like, you know, I consult and I have these ideas for new businesses that I want to do, but like, I currently have the ability to, you know, play at an 8-figure level, right? And, you know, it's a game that I wouldn't get to play right now at my age, you know, being in my 30s, playing at that level. If I had continued just with like the ad agency, I wouldn't be where like that path. I wouldn't seen that. And so to me, I think it's important, like, depending on who you are, is to understand that, like, you have time, and sometimes the best use of that time is to be able to go somewhere that, like, allows you to have, like I said, that education for free, while getting paid, and a lot of the times paid handsomely, right? I've never made as much money as I do now, and like, it doesn't mean that, like, I'm not going to pivot and do my own thing or do a hybrid or do this. And I think that that's really important. So, I mean, I'll end there, and then if there's any questions or whatever, I'm happy to take them, you know, and answer those. But I think that that's important, because I think a lot of people think they have to, you know, like, oh, I got to go do this and I got to figure it all out myself. And sometimes, you know, it's not worth doing that. And, you know, a great copywriter can put themselves in a company, build up a portfolio, and then like pivot it. And if you have that game plan from the beginning, you know, 5-10 years, I'm going to be able to pivot this, like, and leverage it, like, you know, that's key. And so for me, it's like, if I get Genesis Digital to 100 million in revenue for 1 year, right? And we hit that 100 million in year revenue, like, nobody could take that away from me, right? That's now I know what it takes to make 100 million in revenue in 1 year. And there's very few people who can say the same thing that haven't taken outside investment and those kind of things. And that's kind of like a value that you can't really replace, you know, and that's just something for people to think on. It's like, you know, where am I going, and what's the best thing for me right now, because you can leapfrog a lot of these things when you have the ability to execute and execute and execute.
Gotcha. And we do have one question here from Carlo for the Q&A, somewhat rapid fire question section. Carlo asks, how do you manage high stress levels but still be efficient with your business?
Yeah. So I'm big into meditation, like really, really big into meditation. And like, that's a huge grounding thing for me, like on a daily basis. I've also done a lot of internal work over the years on myself. And so just noticing my own triggers and patterns and what causes that and following the threads. Like I was very, very angry. I was a very angry person. And actually, I think that's one of the reasons I would become one of the strongest guys in the world, was because like ultimately I had all this anger and I just channeling it out through the weights, But, when I started to address that, I became a much nicer, better person. And really, I think it's that constant self-work, right? And it's kind of that loving who you are, but at the same time, like seeing the reality and the truth in it, right? And taking extreme ownership. One of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership. You don't even have to read the book to get the whole concept of it. Everything in your life is your responsibility. Like you are responsible for everything. And so when anything goes wrong, it's not someone else's fault, because you can usually see what you could have done differently to prevent that or cause that, right? So I love that concept of extreme ownership. And that's really, for me, when it comes to the stress, it's always like exploring these like recovery tools, right? And taking care of the body, like understanding that nutrition. And I think you just did a call recently on like health and that kind of stuff. Like that plays a huge part in it. Like everything in your life is connected. So business is not separate from relationships. It's not separate from personal health. It's not separate from your spirituality. And so like, as you raise your frequency or vibration or your energy or whatever you want to call it, as a person, like you're going to be able to handle stress at a much higher level. Obviously people with sports background get that because they're playing games, they're getting those kind of daily stresses. Stress is not bad. It's just, how do you handle that? Being able to use breathing techniques, plant-based medicines, float tanks, all these different things are available and become more and more popular. And that's really what I try to do, as I look at like, what's stressing me out and how do we do that? Sometimes you have to just eliminate the stress, like if it's a personal thing like that. But in general, it's about building that toolbox with things to help. And, for some people, meditation doesn't work. They're not able to quiet their mind, but they go for a drive for 2 hours and takes care of it, right? So knowing what gets me to calm down, what gets me back present, right? And I truly believe like the reason people play video games or watch sports or anything like that is in that moment, they forget everything else. And all they're focused on is that moment. And that's really all that exists, is that very moment. And so that's why we can become addicted to these things, because they take us out of our craziness. Because I know you're like me, Troy, like our minds are constantly just bouncing and bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. And people don't realize that. And then sometimes they're like, you're here, but you're not here. And you're like, oh, sorry, I was thinking about like, if I tweak this color on this page, like, would it change my conversion?
I agree. My mind is constantly thinking about something, or I'm like forgetting to get back to somebody, or I have to like do this thing tomorrow, and it's crazy. But Fidi had a follow-up question. What is the first thing you would do if you've never done meditation before, and how does it change the game for you?
Yeah, so I learned this technique. I was at a Mind Valley event in, I think in Mexico somewhere. Guy from Australia called Tom Cronin, and it's basically just a breathing meditation. So you close your eyes and you take deep breaths in and out through the nose, and you just focus on the air going in the nose and the air going out the nose. And so I would just set your, stop a minute and then 2 minutes and build up over that. But really, it's about, excuse me, it's just about focusing that. Understand though, and this is the big thing that kills meditation for people, is your mind is going to wander, right? When you notice that it wanders, all you do is just bring it back to the breath, right? That was how I learned meditation. And, then you can get into other like visualization and all that different stuff. But like for me, that's really, really key. And just understand, like your mind is going to drift. You might fall asleep. You need to sleep. If you're tired and you fall asleep, then you're tired, right? but it's about just coming back to that and being able to do that. And you can get tools like Headspace and things like that that really do help. But ultimately, it's just about, that practice and just coming back to the present, coming back to the present, coming back to the present. For some people, one of the easiest things to do is go for a walk without any headphones or anything like that, and just listen. Like, you'll be amazed at how quick you start to become present to all the bird noises and all the sounds and all of this stuff that you normally tune out. But like the breath meditation is how I started. And I think that, like, for most people, it'll really help. But just give yourself the leeway of knowing that, like, your mind will continue to bounce. It's not going to meditation isn't a magic thing that, like, you just zen out and then you're done, right? It takes practice and time. And I think it's like 12 weeks at 20 minutes a day before you hit like any kind of like Zen state type thing.
Perfect. Thank you. One more question here from Jamila. She says, when do you recommend an entrepreneur should start kind of like delegating or hiring or getting a team? She's kind of wondering, like, do you start doing that as soon as you're profitable and you've got enough money that you're comfortable to do so, or is there a different time?
So I'm going to talk from personal experience because I know people would disagree from me, but there isn't a single position in like that in the teams that are below me that I couldn't step in and do. And so that has given what I believe that is like one of the reasons I'm so good at what I do, is because I understand everything. I could run the Google ads, I could run the Facebook ads, I could build the pages, I could write the copy, I can send emails, I can analyze, I can do all of that, right? Which now when I'm hiring, I know if someone's really capable of doing what I'm hiring them to do. I also can assess their ability to do it. So they can't bullshit me if they don't get the results that are expected, or they don't get things done in a certain amount of time. Like, I can say, like, I know that copy should only take a week to write, or I know that copy is going to take a month to write. So that gives me a leg up. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs, CEO, they have no clue how most of the stuff works. And they're just really, really good at hiring great people and firing even faster. So I think it just depends on you. Personally, like, I'm obsessive and I want to know how everything works before I give it to someone else to do, so that they at some level, I know when I'm getting taken advantage of or not. And I think that that's kind of, I prefer it that way. And I think that the people who struggle usually are the people who don't know how to do those jobs. So they have a lot of blind trust. And early in an entrepreneur's journey, that blind trust is how you end up wasting money with like agencies, because they convince you they're going to send you a ton of traffic, and then it doesn't work because they didn't tell you that they'll send you traffic, but if the page isn't optimized, that the traffic is worthless. So that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with most of that too, just for anybody who kind of wanted another perspective. The only time that I haven't done that is like I've been building, and then I needed a part of my business that was like a couple steps below. And it's gone okay so far. So I kind of wish I understood it a little bit better, but hey, we'll get there. Kevin had one more fun question. What's the best way to increase your squat?
So I follow a site called The Conjugate System. It's by Louis Simmons. It's actually a documentary on called West Side versus the World, but it ultimately is the same concept. You do a bunch of different things to like make sure your squat, like, you never train the actual squat. You strengthen all the weaknesses. So it's constantly varied, and it's really fundamental. But ultimately, and this will go back to like pull it back to business, like in powerlifting, there was 3 things I had to get stronger: squat, bench, and deadlift. My record was for the total, right? So squatted 1,205, benched 910 pounds, deadlifted 815 pounds. My world record, the first world record I broke, was I think 2815 total. And in business, it's the same thing, right? Like for in terms of revenue, I can sell more things to the same person, increase their the value of their order up front, right? So lifetime value, average order value. I can convert more people that land on a page, or I can what's the other one? Anyway, there's like 4 things, right? I'm forgetting the last one here, but the point is, it's just like simplify things down, and then like don't do that. So if you're trying to get your squat stronger, like you're not going to do Olympic lifts. Like that's not going to increase your squat, right? And so those are the kind of things. It's like, what do you do? And then like really focus, put the blinders on and only focus that, right? And I think that that's like super, super key. Like if you're building a email agency or you're building a Facebook ads agency, don't go and learn about SEO because it's just taking up space in your brain, right? And you'll never know everything. So you have to be able to put the blinders on and really just focus. And that's how I got my lift stronger, was I just focused on my lifts. I didn't worry about learning about CrossFit or, Olympic lifting or corrective exercise or any of that stuff. Like I just focused on the things I needed to. And then I would talk to other experts in those fields if I ever wanted to know anything.
Yeah, thank you. That was good. I'm going to be greedy and ask one more question. So his name is escaping me, but there was a linebacker. He played for the Patriots, the Eagles in his career. And he said retiring from sports is really interesting because the highs aren't as high, but the lows aren't as low. And that's one thing that I've really been able to relate to. It's like nothing will make me feel better than throwing, like, I don't know if I ever threw a complete game, but like close to a complete game and like striking out 10 guys, like coming off the field, feeling like Superman. But nothing will make me feel as low as going out there and getting shelled and getting pulled in the first inning. So how has that transition been for you? Just like going from like being one of the best powerlifters in the entire world, and just kind of like leaving that behind and now going into business? Because for me, like I've hardly done anything in baseball in the last few years. And some days I miss it, and some days I try to like push those feelings away, and then some days I'm okay, and it's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend another hour on the existential crisis I've gone through and the rebirths I've had to go through. But ultimately, it's like this: like it's an identity issue, right? Like you identify as a certain thing, and unfortunately, like unlike dogs, so we don't live in the moment, right? And so there's triggers that bring us back to those previous moments. And so when the documentary was made on West Side, like I literally was in tears watching it, and I missed it so much that like I talked to my wife and was like I feel like I want to move back to Columbus and do this again. But what I ultimately realized, number one, is I'm not that same person. So when I was powerlifting, it was like everything was in powerlifting and everything else was secondary, right? And so even though I was able to have a great career and do all this awesome stuff in business, like I like trained first and then worked secondary, right? Like the reason I went through a divorce is because I trained first and relationship was like way down there. And so like that's like one of the things I've come to realize is like, is this feeling that I feel right now, which is okay to miss something, right? It's okay to miss someone. It's okay to miss something, like, like that's not abnormal. But like what's abnormal for me was the concept of I could just step back in and do this tomorrow. Like I could be a world record holder again. And what I realized was no, I couldn't, because like I don't have the mindset I had then. And like I wouldn't be willing to make the sacrifices. And so it was like that was like constantly coming back to like, what do I actually want? Right. And like, this is where daily journaling or weekly journaling, like really comes into like, who do I want to be? And what do I have to become to be that person? And like powerlifting for me, like I left when I was at the peak, right? Which confused the shit out of everybody. But for me, I felt like I was killing myself to get stronger. I was gaining more and more weight. I was doing things that like put my health at risk. Like, and it was like, I achieved what I wanted to achieve and felt like there was nothing left for me to prove. So now was the time to walk away. Like that mentality that I had, I no longer have. Right. And so like, I would love to sit down with guys like Michael Jordan and people like that. And like, how have you dealt with it? Right. Because I think we all struggle. But I think the key to remember is, and like you see guys, and this is my benefit, was I saw guys who were world record holders in the past who were now mere mortals, so to speak, like shadows of themselves, and getting hurt and injured and trying to become who they used to be. They were chasing a ghost. And that was like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be that person. And so when these thoughts and feelings come up, I usually look at like, what triggered this and why am I having this? And like, what maybe is missing in my life that like that desire would be fulfilled by. But like most of the time, it's just recognizing the moment and letting it pass and being like, oh yeah, and it's kind of like, if it's there for like 3 weeks, maybe I'll get under the barbell or something, but usually it doesn't maintain and sustain. So, like I think I did, after I retired, I moved out here like a year and a half later, I did one powerlifting meet and like ended up tearing my hamstring. And I was like, oh, okay, like I get it, universe. Thanks for that reminder. Like I'm not supposed to be doing this,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I definitely broke down in tears too, and I watched the Rick Ankiel documentary about like baseball and the yips. And that was one thing. It's like, I love the game, but like going through that issue was one thing for me that made a lot of that love kind of like turn into stress, and it hurt. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. And
Oh, and I remembered the fourth thing. It's more traffic. I don't know how I forgot that. It's get more customers. That's the fourth thing. It was driving me crazy.
One thing I also remember that. So Chris Long was the name of the linebacker who said that highs aren't as high, but lows aren't as low. So we both forgot and remembered. So perfect. All right. Last thing, how can people contact you, and what should they contact you for?
Yeah, just follow me on Facebook. That's where I'll probably share anything that I'm up to, and then they just go to ajroberts.com. You can opt in to my email list, and I sometimes email. I always want to email every day, but it doesn't happen. So.
All right. Well, thank you. For anybody else who's listening, that's how you contact AJ. If you want to contact me, it's troy@leadparamedic.com. If you want to send an email, Facebook is good too. And you can also go to leadparamedic.com and learn more about some of the groups that I have. So AJ, thank you for being on here. For everybody who's here, thank you for listening and participating. And we'll see you next Wednesday at 1 Eastern.